The wind howled across the northern plains, carrying snow in jagged sheets that cut through even the thickest coats. The mountains loomed on the horizon, dark and silent, standing like ancient sentinels over the little ranch nestled in their shadow. The house sat stubbornly against the cold, its windows glowing with the warm, golden light of hearth fires. A stubborn defiance against the harsh world outside. Inside, Daniel walked slowly along the wooden floors, his boots creaking with each step. His face, lined with the years of hard work and responsibility, was set in a mask of quiet determination. He was a man who had built his life with his own hands, fences, barns, and fields, but also with a heart guarded by old sorrow. The ranch had been his father's, and before that, his grandfather's, and the weight of their legacy pressed on him like the cold outside. This Christmas Eve, Daniel felt more alone than ever. The snow had cut off the road, leaving the ranch isolated, and the work seemed endless. He had always been practical, relying on himself and his own strength. But tonight, the sense of longing and loss felt heavier than any winter storm. A sudden knock at the door broke the rhythm of his thoughts. Daniel frowned, surprised he wasn't expecting anyone. He opened the door carefully, the hinges creaking, and froze. Standing there in the snow was a young woman. Her dark hair partially covered by a simple shawl. Her cheeks flushed pink from the cold. She carried nothing but a small, worn satchel. Her eyes were steady, calm, yet held a quiet sadness that made Daniel uneasy. I am Clara," she said softly, her breath misting in the frigid air. "I've come for Daniel. I am to be his bride." Daniel blinked, unable to speak. The words felt unreal. A bride? At a time like this? At his ranch? He had heard stories, old family arrangements, promises made generations ago, but he never thought it would come to this. You're serious?" he finally asked, his voice low, rough, like gravel. Clara nodded, but did not step inside. The wind tugged at her shawl, and the snow clung to the hem of her coat. She looked small against the raging storm, almost like a figure from a dream or a painting that belonged to another world. I have nothing," she said quietly, glancing at the satchel. "Nothing but myself." Daniel studied her, suspicion and frustration mingling with an inexplicable curiosity. How could a stranger, arriving in the middle of a storm, expect him to accept such a claim? His pride bristled, and yet something about her calm, her courage in the face of this storm made him pause. "Come inside," he said finally, stepping back. "The storm, it's dangerous." Clara smiled faintly, grateful, and entered. Snow melted against the warm floor, and the scent of burning wood and pine filled the small house. Daniel led her to a chair by the fireplace. She sank into it as if she belonged there, quiet and composed, observing everything with sharp yet gentle eyes. "I don't understand why you're here," Daniel said, finally allowing his curiosity to break through his suspicion. Clara's gaze softened. "Because it was meant to be. I don't know all the reasons, but I know that I am here for you, and for this place." The words hung in the air like a promise, fragile but weighty. Daniel wanted to argue, to refuse, to demand explanations. Yet he found himself at a loss. There was something about her presence that made the room feel warmer, the storm outside less fierce, even if just a little. Over the next hours, Clara proved herself quietly and subtly. She helped bring in firewood, wrapped blankets around the animals in the barn, and even managed to coax a stubborn mule back into the stable with patience and a calm authority Daniel had never seen in anyone else. I don't know how you do that," Daniel said one evening, watching her tend to the animals. "Most people would struggle. Most people would give up." Clara shrugged gently. "I've learned that sometimes the smallest acts, done with care, can matter more than the strongest hands. Daniel felt a strange warmth in his chest, an unfamiliar mix of admiration and something else he could not name. There was no magic in her hands, yet everything she touched seemed lighter, easier, as if her presence alone made the burdens of the ranch less heavy. Even as he tried to dismiss the feeling, he noticed small hints that she was more than she seemed. Seeds planted in the garden the day she arrived were sprouting within hours, despite the bitter cold. A weak calf that had refused to eat seemed to come to life when she touched it. A small, broken fence mended itself almost miraculously as she worked on it. Daniel could not explain it, but he felt both awe and unease. This woman, arriving with nothing, was quietly changing everything around her. He wanted to question her, to demand answers, yet he could not. There was a calm, undeniable power in the way she moved, spoke, and cared. At night, Daniel found himself watching her as she sat by the fire, the flames dancing in her eyes. There was a sadness there, a past she did not share, and it tugged at something long buried in his own heart. He thought of the love he had lost years ago, of the loneliness he had wrapped himself in like a shield, and he realized how much he had longed for a presence like hers, even before he knew it. Clara, too, struggled with her own inner conflict. She had been sent here, not just as a bride, but as a guardian of a gift she could barely control. A secret passed down through her family, a quiet power that could restore, protect, and nurture, but only if wielded with care and intention. She feared revealing it too soon, worried that her gift would bring danger, suspicion, or worse, destroy the fragile bond forming between her and Daniel. Days passed, and the storm continued to rage, isolating the ranch. Clara and Daniel fell into a tentative routine. She worked with the animals, repaired fences, and tended the house, while he handled the heavier labor. Their conversations were brief, cautious, filled with moments of tension and unspoken questions. Yet, in those quiet moments, a subtle connection grew. Daniel began to notice the little things. The way Clara paused to admire a bird perched on a fence, the way she hummed softly while working, the thoughtful care she took with every task. He could not understand why, but her presence made the cold, harsh world feel lighter. One evening, as the snow fell heavier than ever, Daniel found Clara standing outside, her shawl wrapped tightly around her, looking toward the horizon. The wind tugged at her hair, but she did not move, her gaze fixed, almost as if listening to something he could not hear. "What are you doing out here?" he called, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Clara turned, her eyes reflecting the firelight from the house. "I'm thinking. There's something coming, something we cannot see yet, but we will face it. Together." Daniel frowned, uncertain what she meant. You're speaking in riddles." Clara smiled faintly. "Perhaps, or perhaps, I am simply aware of what you cannot yet see. The storm is not the only thing we must prepare for." Before he could ask more, a sharp gust of wind blew snow into their faces, and Daniel grabbed her hand to pull her back inside. But even as they stepped through the door, he felt a stirring in his heart he could not ignore. Fear, curiosity, admiration, and longing, everything tangled together, raw and confusing. That night, as the wind howled and the fire crackled, Daniel lay awake, thinking of Clara. He had met many people in his life, but none like her. She had arrived with nothing, yet her presence filled the house, the barn, even the cold winter air, with something extraordinary. Clara, in her small room by the window, stared at the falling snow, her thoughts heavy. She had a gift that could save this place, perhaps even the man who guarded it so fiercely, but she could not reveal it yet. Not until the storm passed, not until trust grew, not until she knew that Daniel's heart was ready for the truth. The night stretched on, silent but for the wind and the crackle of the fire. Outside, the snow swirled, blanketing the ranch in white. Inside, two hearts, guarded and cautious, began to feel the stirrings of something new. And then, in the deep hours of Christmas night, a sudden, violent gust slammed against the windows. The snow outside rose like a living thing, threatening the house, the animals, and the fragile hope of the ranch. Daniel rushed to the door, peering into the storm, his heart pounding. Clara stepped forward, calm and resolute. "We can save it," she said softly. "But you must trust me." Daniel's eyes widened. He wanted to argue, to refuse, but there was a strength in her voice, a quiet authority that brooked no denial. Something in him knew she was right, even if he could not yet understand why. The firelight flickered on her face as she stepped into the snow, her figure small but unyielding. Daniel followed, instinctively, though he did not know what she intended. And in that moment, as the storm raged around them, Daniel realized that this Christmas, nothing would be ordinary. Something extraordinary had arrived at his doorstep. Something that could change everything: his ranch, his life, and perhaps his heart. The wind screamed, the snow danced like wild spirits, and the ranch trembled on the edge of destruction. But Clara, quiet and unwavering, stepped forward with a secret she had carried her whole life, ready to reveal the gift that could save them all. And Daniel, for the first time in years, felt hope stirring where only loneliness had lived before. The storm had passed, leaving the ranch blanketed in snow, pure and silent, like a world paused in white. The sun rose weak and pale, glinting off the frost-covered fields, and for the first time in days, Daniel could breathe without the constant roar of wind in his ears. Yet, the silence was deceptive. The ranch, though standing, had suffered. Fences were bent, a barn door hung crookedly, and the animals were restless from the cold and stress. Daniel moved through the yard, his boots crunching the snow, checking each corner of his property. His eyes were sharp, noting every imperfection, every danger. Despite the storm passing, he felt a weight in his chest, a worry he could not shake. The ranch needed more than hands and strength. It needed care, patience, and perhaps something else he could not yet name. Inside, Clara moved quietly, her presence calm and steady. She had returned from the storm, the snow clinging to her coat, yet she seemed untouched by the harsh cold. She tended the animals with a gentle touch, and Daniel could not help but notice small, almost magical changes. The broken fence in the chicken coop stood straighter than he had left it. The weak calf he had worried over nuzzled against her side, breathing easy. Even the frost-bitten plants in the garden seemed to lean toward her as she worked. Daniel's suspicion mixed with awe. He had begun to see hints of her gift, though he did not yet understand it. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. He wanted to question her, demand answers, but something in her calm gaze stopped him. There was power in her quiet, and he could feel it, like a current in the air around her. "Clara," he said finally, stepping into the barn, his voice low. How are you doing this?" Clara looked up, brushing snow from her hair. "Doing what?" she asked softly, though the corner of her lips hinted at a small, knowing smile. "Everything. The calf, the plants, the fence. It's not normal," Daniel said, his frustration and wonder colliding in his voice. Clara set down her tools and leaned against the barn door. "It's not magic, not exactly. It's understanding. Understanding life, the land, the animals. Sometimes all they need is care, attention, and belief that they can survive." Daniel frowned. "Belief? That's it? You're saying it's just belief?" Clara shook her head. Belief is part of it, but also listening, paying attention, knowing that even the smallest action can make a difference. You built this ranch with your hands, Daniel. I help it live with my heart. We can see sended. We can see the direction. We can see the direction. Daniel stared at her, a mixture of admiration and confusion in his gaze. He had never met anyone like her. She arrived with nothing, yet she seemed to carry the world in her presence. Every task she touched flourished. Every animal she approached calmed. Every plant she tended thrived. It was as if she brought life with her, quietly and naturally. The days passed in a rhythm that blended work and quiet moments of growing connection. Daniel found himself watching Clara as she moved through the ranch, her focus intense but gentle. She sang softly to the animals, hummed while sweeping the barn, and paused often to admire the winter landscape. She had a way of seeing beauty in things he had long considered ordinary, and it made him notice the world differently too. Yet there was still distance between them. Daniel's pride, built over years of hardship, made it difficult for him to express gratitude or vulnerability. Clara's secret gift, though quietly miraculous, was something she could not reveal fully. Not yet. Trust was fragile, and the bond between them was still forming, tentative and delicate. One evening, after the sun had set and the sky was painted in shades of violet and gold, Daniel found Clara sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, gazing at the snow-covered fields. He joined her in silence, letting the wind carry their unspoken thoughts. "You've done more than I ever imagined," he said finally, breaking the quiet. "This ranch, it's alive again. The storm, it almost destroyed everything. But you brought it back." Clara's eyes softened. "It's not just me, Daniel. You built this place. You've worked hard. You've given it life too. I just help it remember that it can survive." Daniel looked at her, seeing not just the woman who had arrived in the storm, but someone extraordinary. Someone who had quietly earned her place here, not by wealth or status, but by courage, patience, and heart. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken feelings. Daniel's chest tightened, and he realized he had been holding his emotions back for too long. The pride that had shielded him for years felt fragile now, melting in the warmth of her presence. "Clara," he began. Clara looked at him, her eyes wide, as if she sensed the change in him. Daniel shook his head, unable to find the right words. He had never been one for declarations or emotions, yet something inside him stirred a longing he could not ignore, a trust he had never offered before. That night, the ranch settled into a calm silence, the animals resting peacefully, and the snow glinting like diamonds under the moonlight. Yet, the peace was fragile. A letter arrived, carried by a neighbor braving the last of the storm. It bore news that made Daniel's heart pound. The ranch's debts were deeper than he had known. A creditor, impatient and threatening, demanded repayment, and without immediate action, the property could be lost. Daniel crumpled the letter in his hands, feeling a weight heavier than any winter storm. He had fought for this land, given everything, and now it could be taken away. He wanted to curse fate, to rail against the unfairness of life. But his anger found no release. All he could do was stare at the snow outside, at the silent mountains, feeling helpless. Clara, sensing his despair, approached quietly. She placed a hand on his shoulder, warm and steady. "We can fix this," she said softly. "I know how." Daniel looked at her, skepticism and hope warring in his chest. "How?" he asked, though the curiosity in his voice betrayed his doubt. Clara smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the firelight from the cabin. Daniel's brow furrowed. "A gift? What do you mean?" "It's not magic, not in the way you think," she explained. "But I can help the land, the animals, and the people here to thrive. I can bring life where it struggles. I can restore what's broken." Daniel stared at her, a mix of disbelief and awe on his face. He wanted to reject the idea, to cling to logic and reason, but the evidence of her care was all around him. The broken fences repaired themselves, the struggling animals healed, and the land seemed to respond to her presence. "Will it really work?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara nodded. "If we work together, yes, but you must trust me completely." Daniel hesitated, pride and fear battling with hope. Then he saw something in her eyes: honesty, courage, and a quiet determination that mirrored his own. He realized that this was more than just a gift. It was a chance for redemption, for healing not just for the ranch, but for both of them. I trust you," he said finally, the words strange but true on his lips. Clara smiled, relief and warmth in her gaze. "Then we begin tomorrow," she said softly. "We have work to do." The next morning, they rose early. Clara led Daniel to the fields, showing him how to work with her gift. She guided him, teaching him to pay attention to the smallest signs, the way a plant leaned toward the sun, the way an animal responded to gentle touch, the rhythm of the land itself. Slowly, Daniel began to see the ranch in a new way, understanding that strength was not just in muscle and hard work, but in care, attention, and belief. Together, they repaired fences, fed the animals, and nurtured the struggling fields. The land responded as if alive, the snow melting in places to reveal green shoots, the animals calm and thriving. Daniel felt hope rising in his chest, a warmth he had not known for years. As the days passed, their bond deepened. Daniel began to share stories of his childhood, of the ranch's history, and of the loneliness that had shaped him. Clara listened, her presence steady and comforting, never judgmental, always understanding. And Clara, in turn, revealed glimpses of her past, the family she had left behind, the secret she carried, and the hope she had that this place and this man could be saved. Through shared labor, quiet moments by the fire, and long walks in the snowy fields, their connection grew, subtle but undeniable. The warmth between them was not just physical, it was emotional, a slow, steady bloom of trust, respect, and unspoken affection. Yet danger still lingered. The creditor's threat loomed, and the ranch's survival was far from certain. Daniel and Clara knew that the coming days would test them, their bond, and the gift she carried. But together, they felt a strength neither had known alone. And one evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Daniel watched Clara tend to the garden, her hands moving with care and precision. He realized, with a start, that he no longer thought of her as just a bride sent to him by an old promise. She was a partner, a guide, and perhaps the one who could heal not just the ranch, but his heart as well. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a promise of change and the stirring of something greater than either of them had imagined. The morning dawned crisp and clear, the sun spilling golden light over the snow-covered fields. The storm that had battered the ranch days before had left the land glistening, almost magical. Frost clung to every tree branch, sparkling like diamonds in the weak winter sunlight. Yet the calm beauty hid a tension that had grown with each passing day. Daniel walked the fields, his boots leaving deep impressions in the snow. The ranch was healing thanks to Clara, but there was still work to do. The letter from the creditor burned faintly in his pocket, a reminder that survival was not yet guaranteed, and the shadow on the horizon that had appeared the day before remained in his mind. A threat he could not ignore. Inside the house, Clara moved quietly, her presence as calm and steady as ever. She had sensed the approach of the visitor, a figure connected to her past, someone who might demand her gift, or worse, take advantage of it. Yet, she did not falter. She had promised to save this ranch, and the man who had come to mean more to her than she could admit. Daniel approached her, his expression guarded yet full of trust. "They're coming," he said simply, nodding toward the distant tree line. Clara turned, her eyes reflecting determination and resolve. "I know, and we will be ready. Together." Daniel took a deep breath. "I trust you," he said. He meant it, more than he had ever trusted anyone. Clara had shown him that strength could be quiet, that love could heal, and that hope was not foolish. It was real, alive, and worth fighting for. Together, they stepped outside to face the approaching figure. A man, tall and imposing, emerged from the edge of the woods. He wore the air of authority, but Daniel sensed something more: greed, curiosity, and a hunger for what Clara carried. "Clara," the man said, his voice smooth and commanding, "I've come for what is yours. That gift you keep hidden, it belongs to those who know how to wield it properly." Clara's gaze was steady, unwavering. "It belongs here," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "It is not for those who would use it for selfish gain." Daniel stepped closer, placing a protective hand near her shoulder. "Leave," he said, his voice low but strong. "This is our home. You will not take anything from it or her." The man's eyes narrowed, but Clara raised her hand slightly, her fingers brushing the air in a subtle motion. Daniel watched, mesmerized, as the plants around the yard seemed to respond. The snow melted in patches where her gift touched the ground, revealing green shoots and healthy earth beneath. "You see," Clara said softly, not looking at Daniel, but at the man. "This is what I do. I do not harm. I heal. I protect." The man's expression faltered for a moment, doubt flickering across his face. But he quickly masked it with a sneer. "Impressive," he said. "But the land alone is not enough. Give me the gift, or there will be consequences." Daniel's hand tightened around the edge of the fence. "You'll find no weakness here," he said firmly. "And Clara is not afraid of you." For a tense moment, silence fell. The wind carried the scent of pine and snow, the world holding its breath. Then Clara stepped forward fully, placing herself between Daniel and the man. She raised her hands, her voice calm and musical. "You will not harm this place. You will not take what is not yours. I give life, but I do not give it to those who seek power over others." Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the man stepped back. He realized that force would not work here, that what Clara possessed could not be taken by threat or intimidation. With a final glance, he retreated into the trees, leaving the ranch and its guardians in peace. Daniel exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest easing. "That was incredible," he said, awe in his voice. "I don't know how you do it." Clara looked at him, a soft smile touching her lips. "It's not just me. It's life, Daniel. It responds when it is treated with care and respect. And we do it together." The rest of the day passed in quiet work. Together, Daniel and Clara repaired fences, tended the animals, and nurtured the land. Each action, though simple, was infused with purpose and care, and the ranch seemed to respond, thriving in ways Daniel had never thought possible. Crops grew stronger, the animals healthier, and even the barn, damaged by the storm, seemed sturdier, as if renewed by their hands and hearts. By evening, the ranch was transformed. The fire in the cabin burned bright, casting golden light across the snow. Daniel and Clara stood side by side on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. "Look at it," Daniel said softly. Everything. Alive again. We did this. Clara shook her head gently. We didn't just save the ranch. We saved each other. You taught me courage, patience, and trust. I taught you, perhaps a different kind of strength. Daniel looked at her, feeling the warmth of her words deep in his chest. I don't know what I would have done without you, he admitted, his voice low, but sincere. You came here with nothing. And yet, you've given everything. Not just to the ranch, but to me. Clara's eyes glistened, reflecting the fading light. And you've given me a place to belong, she said softly. A home. And a heart. To protect. For a moment, the world felt suspended. The wind whispered through the trees, the snow shimmered in the fading sunlight, and the mountains stood as silent witnesses. Daniel reached out, taking Clara's hand in his. Their fingers intertwined. A promise unspoken, but understood. You're my Christmas miracle, he said, a rare smile breaking across his face. And you are mine, Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with certainty. That night, the first Christmas Eve after the storm, the ranch was alive with warmth. The animals rested peacefully, the fire crackled in the cabin, and Daniel and Clara sat together, wrapped in blankets, sharing stories and laughter. It was a simple joy, yet profound, a celebration not just of survival, but of connection, trust, and love. As they sat together, Daniel realized that Clara's gift was not just the power she held over the land or the animals. Her true gift was her heart, her courage, and her willingness to trust in him and to allow him to trust in her. The days that followed were filled with quiet triumphs. The ranch began to thrive beyond Daniel's expectations. Crops flourished under Clara's careful guidance. Animals grew strong and healthy, and the property that had once teetered on the edge of loss now seemed resilient, alive, and full of promise. Daniel and Clara worked side by side, their connection deepening with each shared task. The bond between them was no longer tentative. It was strong, rooted in trust, respect, and the understanding that together they could face anything. One morning, as the sun rose over the sparkling fields, Daniel watched Clara tending the garden, her hands moving with care and precision. He felt a surge of gratitude and love, realizing that she had not only saved the ranch, but had also healed the walls around his heart. Clara, he said softly, approaching her. I want you to know something. You've changed everything. Not just the ranch. Me. My heart. I love you. Clara looked up, her eyes wide with emotion. For a moment, Daniel feared that she might not feel the same, that the words would hang unreturned in the crisp morning air. Then, a gentle smile spread across her face. I love you too, Daniel, she said softly. I have for a long time, even when I did not know it myself. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of all the storms they had weathered, the literal storm that had battered the ranch, and the emotional storms they had faced together. Daniel reached for her, pulling her into an embrace that spoke of safety, trust, and a love that had been tested and proven true. The ranch, now thriving under their care, seemed to hum with life around them. The animals stirred peacefully, the snow sparkled under the sunlight, and the mountains stood silent and strong, witnesses to the bond that had formed between two hearts. Clara's gift, once a secret and a burden, had become the bridge between despair and hope. But it was not the gift alone that had saved the ranch. It was the love, trust, and partnership between her and Daniel. Together, they had overcome storms, threats, and doubts. And in doing so, they had found something far greater than survival. As the first snow of Christmas melted into sunlight, Daniel and Clara stood together on the porch, hands entwined. The ranch thrived behind them, alive and resilient. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt that the world was full of possibilities, not because of wealth or magic or luck, but because of love, trust, and the courage to believe in something greater than oneself. They looked out over the fields, the mountains, and the shining snow. And in that moment, there was a sense of completion, a quiet, profound understanding that this Christmas, a miracle had come not in gold or gifts, but in hearts open to hope, healing, and each other. Daniel squeezed Clara's hand gently. "We did it," he whispered. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Yes," she said softly. "Together, we did it." And as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long golden rays across the ranch, the world seemed to hold its breath in acknowledgement. A land, once on the brink of loss, now flourished. Two hearts once guarded now beat together. And the greatest gift of all love had arrived. Quietly and completely, on a Christmas they would never forget.